Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Zach, and we got a great show today. We're going to be discussing engineering, poetry, connection, and great human endeavors that we all pursue on the daily basis. However, I can't do this alone, so as always, I'm joined by Rafe. Rafe, how are you doing today?
Hey, Zach, I'm sure you haven't guessed it, but I am fantastic. It is, we get to tape this on a Friday, and we have a brilliant day outside. We had some storms yesterday, but spring is coming. The grass is green, flowers are out, the bees are buzzing. It's a wonderful day to be doing podcasting with you. I need to thank all our listeners, as I do every week. Without you guys here, it's quite literally talking to the walls. So it's good to have you because it keeps us out of that room with the padded walls. We're trying to make sure we don't waste your time. So if there's something we can do for you, let us know. You can contact us, of course, at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. We are on Twitter and Instagram and wherever you find podcasts like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Amazon. There's so many podcast places, Zach, that I wonder if there should be like a place that points you to the places that have like a meta podcast thing.
That just hurt my brain thinking about
Yeah.
it. So.
Okay. Well, if there's a platform out there that we need to be on, then let us know, which is really kind of funny because you can't listen to us if you're not on us. Right. So there's kind of that's the thing. All right. So let us know if we can help you out. If you are new to our podcast, welcome. You'll be glad you came. No, we are glad you are here, and we hope that you will be glad you came. Give us 4 episodes and we will give you a reason to come back. We talk about lots of different things and we want to give you reasons to come back for more. And remember, if you tell a friend to listen, we will give you a free episode. So, and finally, Zach, as you know, we are looking to grow our little Bufnagle team. We're just going to call it a helper to make us sound good and if possible, to make us look even better. So send us your information, whatever that might be, a little resume, a recipe for brownies, whatever you want. Send us something that we can use to evaluate you and what you can do to help us out with some of these technical duties that Zach currently takes care of. So that's our intro housekeeping. Zach, we got a great show today. Is that right?
Yes, we do. Earlier, I mentioned we're going to be talking about poetry and engineering, and this may surprise a lot of our listeners, but neither one of us are experts on either poetry or engineering. So we brought in an expert. So today's expert, or big brain smart head of the week, is Brady Bove, who I've known for about 10 years. She's an engineering student at Georgia Tech, pursuing a biomedical engineering degree, a minor in leadership studies, and some psychology stuff on the side. She's also a published poet and author. Her book, A Day in Humanity, is found on Amazon, so we will link that into the description below. She's an extremely kind soul, extremely kind person, and it's a great pleasure of us to welcome you onto the show. So, Brady, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. That was an amazing introduction, so thank you so much for that.
Yeah. So, like I said, we're going to bring you on. We're going to discuss poetry, engineering. But the first thing we got to ask is poetry and engineering. There are two things that are unrelated concepts. How do you kind of bring the two together into the work you do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think people are always surprised when they hear those two parts of me, of the engineering side and the poetry side. They have to be totally separate. Left brain, right brain, no crossing over. But for me, I find them to be so connected to the point where I will tell people that engineering is just another type of poetry. And so I think I really figured that out as I was working on my book because I was, going through these processes of writing poetry, editing poetry, moving forward, really trying to get the story that I was telling across while also taking engineering classes. And in engineering, we like to talk about the problem space and the problem solving process and all of these big problem solving words. And as I was doing that, I was realizing that the way I was solving my engineering problems was very similar to the way I was writing and editing and going through this thing that is poetry, to the point where I realized, they're both expressing a truth. They're both putting something out there in the world. Engineering, you're making medical devices, buildings, literally anything, and using these principles, physics, gravity, things that are just part of the world. And so you're taking something that is known and there and turning it into something that can be used and that can be beautiful. And to me, that is exactly what poetry is.
Well, that's Zach. Where'd you meet this young lady? No, Brady. That's a wonderful approach to all things of the human endeavor, isn't it? I mean, so you see engineering and poetry as I don't want even two sides of the same coin. They both reveal the same thing to you. Do you have other interests outside of the poetry and the engineering that you see? Well, I mean, do you music, or you went to high school here in Middle Tennessee, right near us. Is that right?
Yes, I went to Centennial High School.
All right, wonderful. Yeah. So my guess is at one point you were cheering for your little team, and Zach was actually on the other team at some point. Is that true? Do you think?
That probably was true. Yeah.
All right. That's
probably years apart, but like the yeah.
All right. So you've written a book, and it's available on Amazon. And that was a process that wasn't, it was self-funded, or can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, so my journey was really cool, and I think maybe a little unique. I am technically, it's a hybrid published, so that means that it was funded by me, or I did a pre-sale, so I had a lot of people who came and supported me. Zach was one of them, and he shared his story with me in the book too, but they kind of helped fund the whole process.
Wait. Zach is in the book? Is that true?
Not necessarily me, but yeah, I'm kind of in the book.
All right, well that's great. Okay, so you do a thing. So you're thinking, this when you were in college, is that right? This is very recent, right?
Yes, I published last summer.
So you say, I think I want to write a book of poetry. I'm gonna put these in a book. I'm gonna publish them. And then what's the process? Was this like a Kickstarter thing or one of these group funding things? How did that go?
Yeah, so I was a part of this Book Creators Institute. And so it's led by a professor at Georgetown, Eric Custer. And he basically just went across the country and reached out to writers, people with good ideas doing really cool things. And so he messaged me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, you want to write a book?" And I responded, absolutely, after a little bit of time, because I was in school and stressed a little bit. But that had always been a dream of mine. And so I went along this whole process. He helped kind of form the idea, provide guidance, and it kind of just took off from there. And the funding part was through a GoFundMe.
So the guy again at Georgetown is Professor
Eric Custer.
Eric Custer. Okay. And so is this a thing? Is he like a literature guy? Is he a engineering guy?
He is I would call him a creator of authors. And so he's just bringing people together who want to share their story via a book, via speaking. Kind of, if you have a good story, even if you're not a writer, so to speak, then you can do that, and he'll help you.
So he saw some of the work you had put out there, or you had met him earlier, or?
I'm not quite sure how he found me. I think it was my second or third year at Tech. I just got a random LinkedIn message from this professor saying, "Hey, I'm starting this book journey. Do you want to join me?" So I have no idea how he found me, but I'm so glad he did.
Well, that is fantastic. So you're at Georgia Tech doing biomedical engineering, and so how should I? Okay, so I work in pharma. All right, so I make medicines to hopefully help people get better. I mean, a lot of people deal with medicine in kind of a tangential way. They go see their doc, but they don't realize that there's a lot of equipment that the doctors have. Do you guys design and make and build and improve that stuff? What do you do in biomedical engineering?
Yeah, so I like to call, not just me, a lot of us biomedical engineers like to call us the jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing, because in our classes we're learning a little bit of electrical engineering, we're learning a little bit of mechanical engineering, a little bit of material science and engineering. So you have all of these different classes that you're taking, and then you can do so many things with that. So a big one is, I guess, a big one in the news might be prosthetics or medical devices, so stents, implants, uh, pharmaceuticals. I know a couple of people who went into pharmaceuticals and worked at, in New Jersey or things like that. So there's so many different avenues that you can go, and I've been able to do a lot of really interesting projects using that. Anywhere from making a backpack attachment to help improve posture in college students who have 3,000 pounds of books on their back, to designing a surface electromyography sensor to see how much the muscle is sending signals out.
Okay, wait.
To the
I got to
body.
dig into this. I got to go
I
here.
understood about one of those words and it was surface, and then I was like, that's a made up word. That's a made up word.
They're
Okay,
basically made up words. Yes.
Yeah. So you made a thing to help. I think I saw this somewhere on when I was stalking you yesterday on the interwebs, that it's some kind of strap helper thing to keep the backpack. Am I reading that right?
So we wanted to build, this was one of our design classes, and you walk outside of campus and you see everyone hunched over with their bags on their shoulders, and part of that is just because the weight of the backpack is so heavy. And so we tried to redistribute the weight so it wasn't all on your shoulders pulling you down, to spread it across your chest as well and your lower back.
Yeah. So Zach, remember that backpack we bought in Spokane that time? That has a clippy thing in the front and a waist strap. So I think the real heavy duty backpacker guys have that sort of thing. I want to get back to the poetry thing, because we do have on this podcast on a regular basis. We have Bob, America's favorite rocket scientist, and so we talk a lot of engineering and science stuff. But I don't think we get enough time into the softer side of our human, the lighter side of our human experience here. So you write poetry, and do you see that as do you sit there and you say, you know what, I think I'm going to write a poem about how awesome it was to be on Bufnagle podcast? Or what is your muse?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it kind of depends. So sometimes I will literally just be walking down the street, and my thoughts, instead of being sentences or whatever people think, it comes out as a poem. And so sometimes I'll be like, oh, that was such a cute little poem that I just thought of in my head about the experience that I'm having walking down the street with the birds singing. And it's just there and then gone. And then other times, especially when I was writing my book, I usually had a topic that I wanted to write about. And for my book in particular, every single poem is a story. And a lot of times they're not even my stories. So I would sit down with someone and just have a conversation with them, kind of like we're doing here, but specifically about a time that they had that they want to share about, high moments, low moments, everything in between. And after talking with them, I would usually just let the story ruminate a little bit and really come to feel it and know it, and then sit down and be like, okay, how do I tell this story through a poem? What kinds of things do I need to use? Certain rhyming schemes or, word choice and things like that. And then just kind of sat down and put pen to the paper and worried about editing later.
Yeah, so we've talked about this before because I gave you a couple stories for your book, and
wait a minute, wait! You gave her a couple stories for the book?
I think it was two. I could be wrong.
Holy cow! I've never heard this. Okay, this is great. All right, so you gave her some stories.
Yeah, but in that is like kind of this idea of, we share our story and then you kind of share that story onto the world, and there's this human connection element of, someone's going to resonate with that story or feel connected to that story in a way that makes them, I don't know, feel more connected or more part of something greater than themselves. Kind of like that idea of chasing the human endeavor that we talked about earlier. Do you feel that a job as a poet is to kind of do that, is to share a story that might not be their story, but is someone else's story, to allow someone else to make a difference? We've talked about before, like a ripple effect. Kind of going off that, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts. Let me try to get them out. But I would say, poetry in itself is an expression of truth. And as a poet, it's how do I take what's out there in the world? How do I take someone's story and turn it into something that's beautiful, that is a point of connection? And so I think that is really important. And that doesn't mean that you only have to talk about people's stories or, the sky is blue or these other things, but it's about taking the human experience and making it real and making it accessible for so many people.
So I'm hearing. I was making some notes here because I was like, "This is very fantastic stuff." I'm hearing this statement, and you've said it twice now. You want to express some truth, all right? And I hear a lot of writers and artists say, and I'm excited that you said that about engineering, that it reveals truth, right? If you can build a building that doesn't fall down, that's an expression of truth. Is like, I have to recognize gravity and forces and stress and all that stuff to keep it upward. But anybody who builds anything expresses truth. And I think you would also say that about our human experience. We are a physical manifestation of ourselves, right? That's who we are. So, this seems like this is not a particularly materialist view of the world, that there are truths that are behind what we see, and you get to reveal them because you have talent in two very diverse fields. You get to reveal them in two different ways. Do you see that? Or am I just an old man babbling about philosophy I've read lately? I mean, well, I know that's the case, but how do you see that?
Yeah, I guess that's not fully something I've thought about, but I would definitely say that as we go through life, there are so many things that are influenced by, the world, by those truths that are kind of within us and around us. And taking that truth and recognizing, like, there is one truth and this is it. And being honest about what it is, it'll help. So, like, as you build something, as you write something, to know, like, there is a truth behind this, and all I am doing is expressing it. I don't know too much about the philosophy, if I can speak on that.
I love it. We've talked again about that, like, human connection point, and you mentioned in your book, in the intro to it, kind of this connection to the world and this bringing people together. And there's this idea of building resiliency and building strength through poetry and the expression of that. Maybe if you want to talk a little bit on that, or let's kind of explain that thought process, because it is different than what you would do in engineering of, hey, this is a building that it does, you don't necessarily get to do the same resilience or the same strength.
Yeah, so I think this idea for me of poetry building resiliency has been fueled in a personal experience and then also in some of my work with my psychology course. But for my personal side of things, especially when I was younger, I had a really hard time with anxiety and figuring out how I fit in the world, and everything that was going on just seemed like so much, and I couldn't label that. I couldn't put it out there to actually process it. And so I found that poetry allowed me to kind of do that and to have that point of, I just put it out there, it's there, and then I can process it and allow my brain to work through it. And I think that's why now I am so, like, I walk down the street and I think in poetry, because that's what I've started to use as a tool to really go through my thoughts.
Well, that is
Rafe is at a loss of words. For the first time in his life, Rafe is at a loss of words.
Okay, wait, no.
Hold on to this moment.
I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm thrown back to when I was in grad school, and I was working on my thesis nonstop, because that's what you do toward the end of grad school. And and I would see everything through that lens. All right. So I guess there's a lesson here that whatever you immerse yourself in starts becoming the lens at how you view the world. So to me, that's I've never thought to think in terms of poetry, but I'll be doing that this weekend. I would be like, I'm wondering, I remember in the Princess Bride, Zach, you remember when Fezzik and Indigo, they talk in those little rhymes back and forth just to, right?
Anyone want a peanut?
Yeah. So is that, I guess that's not, you're probably a little bit more refined than that, Brady. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, most of the people who've read my poetry who are close to me, one of the first things they try to tell me as an edit is you should add more rhymes. So I'm not really a big rhymer in my poetry, and I think part of it is it's so much fluidity of my thoughts and putting things out there. But yeah, I'll be going and I'm looking out the window right now because it's just so beautiful, and when I see that beauty, or even in the hard times or things like that, I kind of bring it in, think on it, hold it, chew on it, and then the output is sometimes poetry.
Now, when you are doing engineering stuff, like you built that thing with the surface that made electrical hearts runners. I forget every, but you have to write. Engineers write reports when they're done, right? Do people say, "Here you go, Brady, you write the report because you're an author and you can make." Do you ever get the desire? Okay, because I've had this desire. Okay, I've had this desire when writing up clinical study reports. I'm like, you know what? I wonder if I wrote this whole stats section in iambic pentameter, if anybody would notice. So, do you ever have any desire to do something like that?
I think my writing style, even with technical reports, tends to be on the less technical side, and probably because of that. So I really enjoy writing the reports, and for me, my favorite part is to write the introduction or the background where you have the reasoning or the motivation behind the study or whatever you're building, because that's where you get to put in that human connection piece, especially for engineering, for biomedical engineering, where it's talking about X many people struggle with this, and so we're trying to help with that. But I tend to be on the editing side, and I also love M dashes. So,
whoa. Okay, so thank you. All right, so I have been this aficionado of interesting punctuation and beautiful style. All right, so an M dash, Zach, is the long dash.
I know.
Well, it's the width of the M, okay? And there's an N dash, which is with the N, and there's also the hyphen, and there's the minus sign, okay? So those should be in your typographic repertoire, all right? So they should all be there. And so I could talk typesetting so do you use that like to make big sentences? Do you like to set things off with M dash? That you're a big M dash fan?
I love M dashes. I'm a fan of commas. I think I just love asides. So you're saying your sentence and you're like, oh, by the way, I'm gonna just throw this in between some M dashes and keep going. So.
All right. Well, I'm a big semicolon fan. And the other thing that I really like that I don't see much of anymore is hanging punctuation. So what they would do back in the day is, the left edge of the text is always aligned. Mm-hmm. And they would often take a quote. If the quote started the line, they would put the quotation mark outside the edge of the. Okay, it's called hanging punctuation, and it really gives a refined look to the book, and you can see really nice typeset books have ligatures in them. You know about ligatures? So if you take like the letter, if you write the word ruffle, like you're going to eat some Ruffles, those potato chips. All right, the F and the F kind of go right next to each other, and the connection of the F's are this. It's not two separate letters; it's a ligature of the FF, and sometimes the FF and the L all are one piece.
Oh wow!
Or like if you write F and I, that little serif on that little ball on the end of the F will actually be the dot for the I, and that's a ligature. I mean, so you can do these very intricate. They used to do that all the time. These hidden little pieces of craftsmanship that are there for the person who likes to look at them. So there's an aside, Zach. I wonder if it'll make the edits. But I'm reminded you talk about when we were talking about what the truth reveals and what's out there. I remember the Shakespeare quote that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, and that's Hamlet to Horatio in Hamlet, and like there are more things out there than you can even think up. Um, when you're doing poetry, do you see yourself as just I'm like making all things new, that you're creating all this new world? And that's one question I have. And the other question is, do you do other kinds of writing for fun? Do you write essays or I don't know
No
whatever?
one writes essays for fun.
Well, I was just thinking, I know someone who does, and so those are some thoughts.
Right. Okay. So, shoot, I've forgotten the
There,
first
there, there,
question.
there, there are well, like when you build new things that have not yet been thought up. I mean, it's got to be a wonderful creative rush to create something anew.
Got it. Yeah. So, I guess one thing that I think about a lot when I'm writing is, has someone else already written this? Or what thoughts have I put out there that are the same as someone else? And I think that's why I love writing about experiences, because even if someone else has had a very similar experience, me putting into words is just a tool for them to say, hey, I've had something very similar. I can connect to that. And so, yes, it's so exciting to think of a unique play on words or change the formatting of my poem, or even looking at punctuation of where am I going to put my comma. And it's kind of, once you finish and you have your final poem, it's, even if someone's done something similar, these are my words and this is a beautiful story, and I know that someone's going to connect to it. So I think that's where I really get the pride.
Yeah. So we've talked again. So you mentioned that connection of similar feelings, and it kind of goes to this idea of like letting people know they're not alone and feeling their feelings or expressing those feelings or being able to be comfortable even expressing those feelings. Myself, I'm a huge advocate of people, mental health awareness, mental health advocacy, things of the nature. I know you are as well. Do you feel that your poems kind of, or your writing in general, exist in a space that gives hope for those who may be struggling to feel like they are alone?
I'd like to think so, for sure. And I was doing a project once and came across a really staggering statistic that half of American adults report feeling lonely. And when you think about the fact, well, everyone has a cell phone and you can just text and be on social media, how in the world do you feel lonely? And it's, if it's through a phone, you're missing something, you know? And so I want to be able to provide a tool for people to see, you know, even in a book, someone else has done this, someone else has felt that way. It's not Instagram where everything is perfect. It's real, it's raw, and I can recognize that I'm no longer alone. And I think that was a huge motivation for my book and something that I am really passionate about sharing. And I think that's also why I lent on other people to ask their stories, because I've had my own mental health struggles, but I can't pretend to know what everyone else is struggling with. So getting more stories increases the likelihood that someone will connect to at least one of them. And I think at the end of the day, if the only person who's impacted by that poem that I wrote is the person whose story it was, to see their story in a new light, then that makes it worth it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You talked about how you reach other people. One thing that surprised me about this podcast that we do is, Zach was like, "Hey, Dad, we should do a podcast." I was like, "Okay, you figure out how to do it, and I'll do it with you." And he did, and now we do, and now you and
And now you're stuck with me.
now you're stuck here with us. All right, but what has been uh, immensely humbling and rewarding, gratifying, and actually a little bit scary to know that this is going on is the number of people that have contacted us and said things like uh, what Zach said about seeking help for mental illness or for pulling yourself back up or the things that we've mentioned. It's amazing the impact you can have, and it's really gratifying, and I'm sure that's a similar thing that you feel in your poetry stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think
going off that too, we've talked before, Brady, about the concept that as long as I impact one person's life, I did it. Like if I can share my story, if I can be vulnerable, if I can encompass all of that and express it somehow, and I help one person, then nothing else matters because then I did it. I can say, cool. And then maybe you go on and you help the second person or you help the third person and you keep moving forward. And we keep helping other people. We rise each other up. And I don't know, we get maybe a little happier, a little better, a little more holistic society. So
Yeah.
So I have these notes here, and one of them says impact of faith and religion on these two passions. And now I know you and Zach actually I think met in Honduras, right, on a church mission.
Yes.
Is that accurate? So how has that experience influenced what you do both on both sides of these of this coin? And can you tell me about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I'm Catholic, and I think that in a way my faith kind of is rooted in everything I do, and it helps guide that truth that I was talking about earlier of this is where the truth is. And even if I'm telling the story of someone who isn't Catholic or who is sharing their religion or their experiences, that doesn't mean that the truth has to be any different, and still using that to fuel and share a story. And I think in engineering too, it's kind of rooted in what is my purpose, and that is helping people. And so, how can I use my math and science skills and my writing skills and put them together and create something that is just helping other people? And like Zach was talking about, kind of making us all lifted up a little bit more.
So you've had this book out there on Amazon for how long has that been? You said you published that last year.
Yes, I published it in July. So
Yeah, yeah. So all right, so you're coming up on a year from that, and I'm sure you've heard responses from people, and you've had some feedback on that, and that's got to be gratifying. Is there anything particular that stands out? Some feedback that you heard?
I think mostly just looking at the reviews, there's a couple of people who will randomly put a review on Amazon or Goodreads, but also just hearing from personal accounts of someone that I got the book and then they gave it to someone else, and seeing it pass on and people telling me, oh, this poem is my favorite. And for me, I could never pick a favorite, because it almost feels like I created each one, and how can I pick a favorite among all of them? But other people saying this is the one that meant the most to me, and it really was really impactful.
I mean, there's these stories, and we said earlier, like there's something's gonna resonate with someone, and it's I don't know. For me, like I've read multiple times. I'm actually reading through it a third time now. It's kind of part of like I wake up in the morning, drink some tea, and I read a poem by Brady because I have the book and it's available to me. But like as I'm reflecting back on this, as I've grown up a little bit more since the last time I read it, it's just like be so much of this like manifestation of like things that sometimes we don't know how to put into words. Someone put into words for us, and it's gonna maybe impact our day to have us slow down a little bit, or to call a friend and tell them, "Hey, I love you. I'm thinking of you." Yeah, we have FaceTime and all these other things in COVID to connect to people, but we can't have real truth without kind of maybe that tangible source that comes with a book. And I think it's just I don't know this great that there's these methods and there's these things people going out and doing these great and wonderful things.
So you've written the book. You're going to be graduating.
Yes.
So other than you can say I got my start on the Bufnagle podcast, are you going to be making the what's in your future? What are you planning?
Yes. So I think I told Zach, but I have a lot of things going on in the next few months. I'm graduating college, which it's taken me 5 years. So my dad would be saying, finally, right now. And then I'm getting married, and we're moving up to Wisconsin, where I'll be starting work at 3M as an engineer there. And so that's kind of the engineering and outside of live track. And for my poetry, I'm just kind of trying to share as much as I can. I'm speaking at a middle school, my old middle school, next week, and kind of, again, sharing what poetry can do for you and those points of connection. And then hopefully one day I'll sit down and start a second book and go from there.
So, so you are by all measures successfully doing what you want to do, at least in a certain regard. So, do you have advice for budding writers, engineers, in particular, little girls who want to go do something that may or may not be in the typical stereotypic woman's wheelhouse?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is there is a lot of things out there that say you can only do one thing. You can only be an engineer or a math and science person, or you can only be a creative, a writer. And I'd like to think that I am a testament to the fact that you don't have to force yourself into one path. If you want to be an astronaut who also paints in space, like that might be a little hard, but I'm sure you could do it and figure out how to use paint and gravity.
We are gonna ask America's favorite rocket scientist if you can paint in space. That will be one of the questions next time we have him on. We have an episode coming up on missions to Mars, and we will ask him if you get bored, will they be able to paint? So, all right. So there are sorry. So there are things you don't feel limited by what people say, and what else?
Yeah, don't feel like you have to be put in a box. If that you think outside of the box, and if your dream is just outside of the box, outside of your comfort zone, ask for help, but do it and lean on your support system. And if someone says you can't do it, get a different support system because you can do it.
All right. So
You guys surround yourself with people that believe in your crazy and wild dreams, regardless of how crazy and wild they are. Just like painting in space.
Exactly. Paint in space. Do
Paint
it.
in space. That's the lesson from today.
Okay, so Brady, this is the thing. So if you ever get picked for the astronaut program, and I do have to say, I do have experience successfully applying to the astronaut program. Now notice that the conditions of that statement. I actually successfully filled out the application, but there are only
You get
30.
denied.
I did. I got actually denied, which is more than I expected to just never hear from them again. But they actually denied me and 29,000 other people. So, but if you get to the astronaut program and you are ever in space, I expect poems from space and paintings from space. Is that
I'll just put them together in one book.
you could paint the poems in space? That would be phenomenal. So, are you going to be back in Middle Tennessee this summer sometime?
Yes, once I graduate, I'll be there until I have to move up to Wisconsin in July. So it'll be
And
about
and,
2 months.
and where are you going in Wisconsin? You said you're going to 3M, and that is where?
So 3M's kind of everywhere, but the specific location I'm going is Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. It's a small town right off the Mississippi River across the border of Iowa.
Wow, that's I've not thought of Prairie du Chien in a long time. So I grew up in Wisconsin, so there's a special little soft place in my heart.
Oh,
And
no way.
yes, so I was I don't know anybody who works at 3M up there, but I'm sure you will make many new friends. So engineering, biomedical engineering. Can I go back to this thing you made with tell me about these projects again, because these fascinate me when I hear. So we talked about the bookstrappy thing. Tell me a little bit about the thing you do and how that helps people's lives.
Yeah, so I've actually had the chance to work on a lot of projects. The other one I threw out is for short, SEMG. I feel like that might be a little bit easier than the long string, but it's essentially we were trying to see is it better to run with shoes on or to run barefoot and how it affects your muscle calf activation. So it was just a sensor you put right on your calf and then you go and you run. And so we didn't find any difference, and that
Well,
could be to say.
No, I looked at that. I remember seeing two little box plots with the little dots on them. I was very pleased, very nice plots. But
Thank
I
you.
noticed that I thought in the barefoot one, I noticed not a difference in mean, but I noticed a difference in variance.
That
Now,
is.
is that did I see that right, or should I
The
have read the whole thing?
statistician comes
Well,
in.
I'm just trying to talk to the engineer in engineering land, or should I say that in a poem?
Poems only. Everyone was talking poems.
Poems
No,
only.
honestly, I don't know if that's something we looked at, but it probably should have been something we looked at because that could have a big difference in how you go. And I think we did look a little bit into differences in running form, because that just because your calf muscle is activated differently doesn't mean that there are aren't other things going on. Because a shoe kind of protects the more sensitive points of your foot, so you might be more likely to land on different areas than if you're barefoot and you kind of want to be more delicate about where you step.
Oh, this is we should, don't tell me when you're coming to Middle Tennessee, because I'll make you come and chat about these sorts of things. So you're going to 3M in Wisconsin, in Prairie du Chien, and you're going to be working on what? Have they told you yet, or you just have to show up and write documents in pentameter? Yeah, in poem form. Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what I'll be working on yet, but I'm entering into their optimized operations program. So it's a 2-year developmental program full of other engineers, and you, in the end, will get your Lean Six Sigma green belt. So it's going to be in manufacturing most likely, and helping whatever they're making, I don't know yet, be manufactured better.
So no, that doesn't sound, I don't know. I think of 3M, all right, and what comes in my head are the Post-it notes, right? Mm-hmm. And but they make lots of stuff, right? And yes. Do they make biomedical stuff?
They do. So they do have like a healthcare sector, and for example, they're behind NextCare bandages, which I didn't really know about. But I also am not sure if I'll be in the biomedical sector at the beginning, or if that's something that I'll have to kind of work my way up into in the program.
That is, I am, there are times when we talk to young people, Zach, as old people. You're not old people. I'm old people. But sometimes we talk to young people and we become.
So when you talk to me?
No. There are times I get disheartened, and there are times I'm just ecstatically heartened. And this is one of those times. Brady, this has been a phenomenal discussion. I'm really glad you were able to come on here. Zach has one final question for you, I think.
So Brady, what is some advice you can give to our listeners on how to find and seek the good in life?
I think we talked about this, but changing your perspective of when you go outside, maybe noticing what other people are doing, and that person who's walking down the street singing to their music out loud, when instead of saying that of, wow, why are they singing out loud, saying it as, I'm so glad that person is joyful, and seeing everything as poetry, as an expression of truth. And, how can I live that joy and that truth in my everyday life? And I think that's seeking the good.
All right. I can't disagree with that. So Brady, it's been fantastic to have you on. It's always good to chat with you and talk with you. So again, thank you all for listening. Go seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.